I've been discussing the upcoming inauguration of the Dangote Refinery with economist and MD of Financial Derivatives, Bismarck Rwani. Joining the discussion now are Ronke Onodeko, Principal Consultant, DRNL Consult, and Uwa Osiadaye, Senior Vice President, Oil and Gas at FBN Quest Merchant Bank. Thanks for joining me. Great to have you both on the show to join the discussion. So I wanted to start with Ms. Onodeko. Nigeria's downstream sector recently has been discussed a lot in the light of the subsidy discussion. Do you have any thoughts on how this refinery coming on stream and helping to shore up our supplies domestically could impact that particular debate?
So I'm quite excited about the commissioning of the refinery for quite a few reasons. One, we've been behind on refining capacity in the country, and it has affected our foreign exchange reserves. I'm particularly interested to see how we're going to make savings from the cost of shipping out and shipping back in, and have gains from the fact that we're going to build capacity locally and move people back home who are in the industry. We're going to develop our shipping industry as well, refining, distribution. So I'm trying to see where the balance will come and where some savings. It's unfortunately not going to be a huge or a significant savings in the fact that we're not suddenly going to be saving 70% because, the refinery is going to buy crude at international market prices. You put that into net back pricing, prices of products will be significantly the same, but you'll have some savings from shipping, NPA dues, and things like that. However, he has borrowed money in foreign exchange and has to repay back in foreign exchange. So he's not going to be Nairanizing his inputs to make it comfortable for the country. But I'm quite excited that we will see some savings, we'll see some development, we'll see some more depth in the industry as opposed to just trading retail. And we sell the crude, we bring back the products. Lots of people are the middlemen will shrink. So I'm looking forward to seeing how
that's a very interesting point you make. Every time something like this happens, there's a sense in which as an oil producing country, people feel we have an entitlement to cheap oil or cheap petroleum products. So one of the things that does concern me is whether this actually creates an opportunity for them to really look at the subsidy issue. In terms of policy, whether this will accelerate a move to remove the subsidy, or it's still going to be a wait and see approach.
I think there would be a bit of a window whereby subsidy removal will not be as harsh as it would be if we were still importing. And it's important that Nigerians begin to see the country as a whole and not the industries in silos and the sectors in silos. A bit of loss in oil price, in oil trading and marketing and cost will add value to other sectors like infrastructure, education, healthcare. So, you're going to be paying a little bit more for your fuel, but then you will be getting a lot more in other areas. If we keep our eyes on the indices, let's have a national dashboard where we're seeing where the savings are going and ensure that the savings are really going to the sectors that are lagging behind.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, no, thanks for that point. So, Uwa, I think given the scale and the quantity of daily output that's meant to come out of the refinery, how do you think it's going to shape the evolution of regulation and policy in the downstream sector in terms of competition? What are your thoughts?
Okay, I think if you look over the last 4 to 5 years, government policy around things like subsidies has really had an eye on the resumption of this refinery. But in terms of looking ahead, what sort of policies do we expect? Already we see the drafting of the domestic crude supply obligation from the Commission, that's the upstream regulator, and the mid and downstream regulator, the authority. This sort of DSO agreement, we have seen it in the gas sector space, and the smaller refineries, so to speak, have been crying out for policy that will push volumes to their refineries as feedstock, which hasn't happened. But we can see the Commission has drafted it, and it's will be gazetted, in the coming weeks. So it's clear that federal government policy around oil and gas especially downstream, would be pivoting on this refinery.
Yeah, it's interesting. We almost forgot the smaller refineries. We also almost forgot that Africa actually has a lot of refining projects coming upstream. Do we actually risk a glut in supplies? Can we even envisage a scenario, I don't know who wants to take that, where we end up with a glut in supplies and actually that overall pushes the prices of products down across board? What are your thoughts?
Well, a glut in capacity.
In capacity, right, in capacity,
I feel at some point the investment case for refinery wouldn't be good enough. So if you look at the nameplates for Dangote Refinery, 650,000 barrels. The NNPC refineries are 450. I mean, you have to take in consideration the NNPC is investing around $3 billion in rehabilitation currently. That's already 1.1 million barrels. Nigeria's current daily crude oil production, if you look at the past 12 months, is somewhere around 1.2, 1.3 million. So it finally matches. So, I mean, making a case for new investments at some point wouldn't be there. For me, I think the refining industry or subsector of the oil and gas industry will closely resemble what we have in the cement space, where you have three big players, 3 or 4 big players. I mean, there are some projects that may come online 2024, 2025 that are as grand as, 1 or 2 NNPC refineries. I'm speaking in particular to the Boa Refinery and petrochemical projects in Akwa Ibom.
Yeah, very interesting. I don't know, Mr. Rani, whether you had any thoughts on some of what has just been discussed.
I think that we are conflating a number of things. One is the fiscal impact of this in terms of the subsidies. So what are you subsidizing? What are the consumers benefiting and what are the people benefiting? 2 is the fact that there's an investment. 3 is the exchange rate impact. But I want to look at it broadly. The fact that you have refineries being rehabilitated doesn't mean that they'll be viable. We've been trying to rehabilitate the refineries for the past
decades, yeah.
And they never. So an unviable project will die a natural death. Okay.
But you have a number of smaller refineries.
Yeah, those smaller refineries, depending on what the basic assumptions of the economics of it is. But in this business, a business of scale, economies of scale, globally. And therefore, when you have big scale, your average cost comes down. When you have modern technology, your output and your productivity and efficiency gains come in. When you put the two together, you're competing across West and Central Africa, it is inevitable that some of the inefficient and badly structured projects are going to die a natural death. Yeah. I think that's 1. 2 is the fact that what does this mean? This industry, there's the upstream, midstream, downstream. And basically, the big infrastructure spend is just about to begin. In other words, your pipelines, your depots, and all the other things, right? That is where the people benefit more from, right? Because if you look at the template today, you have all sorts of things that are coming in to increase those costs. If you have a pipeline coming from Escravos straight to Dangote Refinery, so you don't have the tankers coming in, and you have pipelines evacuating finished products into different depots in different parts of the country. There are huge productivity gains, right? And efficiency gains that will come out there. Those things will actually mean that the Nigerian consumer will be paying less because this project is taking place here. There's no way you can subsidize inefficient producers to be in that value chain. And then also, the whole idea is that as you go along, right, you have petrochemicals and all sorts of things. The truth is that the Nigerian government must begin to comply with best practice in all respects in terms of judicial, the administration of justice, the alternative dispute resolution, governance as a whole. When that happens, investments come in and to drive it across sectors.
Yeah,
I think that's
very, very interesting point on the broader regulatory framework. Now, we've heard a lot about all the ancillary infrastructure that will need to traverse different territories. Are you at all bothered by the environmental sustainability aspect? There's a lot of speculation in the market about fumes from the refinery and about being too closely located, sometimes it's hard to know what is sensationalism and what is actually evidence-based. What are your thoughts on how the environmental impact should be approached?
Okay, the first thing that people need to understand is that Nigerian crude is low sulfur. It is a highly sought after crude worldwide because the sulfur levels are extremely low, and people actually buy our crude to blend with the high sulfurs to bring down the emissions. So we don't have that issue here. Nigeria has been brought into a discussion that is above our pay grade.
And what do you mean? In what sense?
We were sitting at the table with the Western world who have emission issues.
Okay.
We don't have, I mean, if you look at our
carbon footprint.
Our carbon footprint is much lower. And it's a brand new refinery. The technology is better. The efficiencies are better. So I don't even see it as an issue that we should be talking about at all. But the way the international space works, if you're borrowing money from Europe or Asia, wherever, these are discussions. So I'm seeing Dangote taking advantage of carbon credits. So it should even be an income generating line item for him or for the refinery, and put us in the limelight to show the efficiencies that can be gained if all the refineries are upgraded or totally dismantled.
So in essence, this may set a new standard for
It
how
should set a new
refinery
standard.
development
Yes.
should work in a sustainable manner.
That's what I believe.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point you make, because there's all sorts of news out there about the environmental impact. And I'm sure to have got funding for that, they would have had to do an environmental impact assessment.
Yes.
Yeah, one would think for such a world-class refinery. So Uwa, looking at competition right now in the downstream landscape and how, petroleum products are transported, we heard, several months or years back that deals had already been struck for the offtake of products for refineries. How do you think players in the downstream sector will be positioning themselves to perhaps, get some of the positive collateral from this refinery's throughput? What are your thoughts?
In terms of structure, I don't think the structure will change too much, because you will have your wholesale energy traders, picking up the bulk and distributing it to the usual suspect, the marketers that we currently have. If you think for domestic sales, I would imagine before reaching financial close, offtake arrangements are sort of things that you have to take before reaching financial close. For Nigerian sales in particular, I would say, I won't be surprised if the NNPC is keen to be in the position to buy bulk from the refinery for domestic sales. And the reason is simple. Currently, the NNPC acts as pretty much the sole importer of gasoline, bulk importer of gasoline, has a 20% stake in this project. Post the acquisition of OVH, is the largest single distributor of petroleum products. So that's, I would imagine that wouldn't, change dramatically. From an international point of view, because the refinery is positioned to export quite a bit of volumes, right? The big energy traders such as Glencore, Vitol, be positioning or might have already positioned, to participate.
And what about some of the inefficiencies we see in the current system? Most of our petroleum product transportation is via trucking.
Yes.
Right? We're still reliant on the roads, and we know what road infrastructure is like. I think for this refinery to kind of reach its full potential, even in terms of the economics, is really what other investment needs to be made in the broader infrastructure network. What are your thoughts on what should happen?
So yes, you have, very inefficient depots, or depots that the NNPC may have constructed several decades ago. What you need currently is, a network of depots across the country and infrastructure, pipeline infrastructure that would, move products right from Lekki, to the hinterland for positions in different regions. So that way, you save trucking costs. What you just spoke about, an environmental impact, it would be less. You have cost savings, and to an extent, in terms of pricing. So what's the system currently that we have, the petroleum equalization, where the government tries to, all those things would pretty much be eliminated or reduced.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see how that evolves. Yeah.
We have that infrastructure. This thing was built everywhere from Warri Port Harcourt all the way to Maiduguri, Sokoto, Kaduna, and all of that. Those things there, but they were abandoned. So the cost, what you need to invest in is how to rehabilitate all of that. Once you do that, then the wear and tear on the roads will be reduced, and of course the efficiency of transporting it, and it'll be much more carbon friendly. And so I think that's it, and that is the big investment. Let me say maybe 10, 12, 15 billion dollars can rehabilitate all of this. It's there all the way to Mosimi or Rare. So everywhere it's there, and it was done in the 70s for a fraction of what we're talking about today. Now, so if that is done, then you now need the crude to take the pipelines to bring the crude to the refinery here. And then the evacuation will be done with all of this in place, distribution. So that, but then new investments, because you are going to be sending it across to West Africa. So of course, you would have tankers taking this thing out, or you can actually pipe all the way to these West African big markets like Accra, Abidjan, and all of that.
Yeah. So. Very, very interesting point. So, Ms. Onodeko, I wanted to ask you about the broader development impact. You know, a lot has been said about, and not necessarily from the environmental side, a lot has been said about job creation, but what do you see as to how Nigeria could leverage the presence of this refinery to kickstart a new approach to development? I know that sounds really grand and far-fetched, but what are some of the things we should really be doing right now as a country?
I think one of the things that Nigeria needs to look back into is the impact the bad fuel, I think it was 2 years ago. It got as far as Mali, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, Niger, Togo, Benin, Ghana. So there's already an informal, illegal route into all of those countries that exist. How can we turn that around and maximize that opportunity, and maximize it and turn it into an opportunity? So we really could set out a hub for not just petroleum products, but other things, if we formalize and crystallize that which already exists. If that happens, it's going to open up the sub-Saharan African cohesion in trade. And it's going to begin to help us trade with our partners. We have more to offer than we have coming in. So I see Nigerian companies extending their tentacles into all of these other countries.
Right.
I see Nigerian financial services moving with the trade.
Because of trade finance and the opportunities.
Yes. And what's going to happen is that you're going to need new skill sets, people who are more mobile, people who are more technologically driven to start finding solutions to bring this to a platform where everybody can play in. So, you know, I see technology, I see trade, I see finance. There's so many industries that have the potential to grow exponentially if they really sit and tap into it.
Yeah.
And in a short period of time, I mean, everybody remembers how when the GSM phones were coming out and people had set up shops to sell the cards. And within 6 weeks, we found out that the cars were going to be sold on the road in traffic. So I think some things are being put in place now that the natural course will deviate and meander into places where it's a lower barrier to enter those spaces. So I'm quite excited to see how it evolves and how it grows itself. We've done our bit now. It's going to do its own thing. So we should sit back, watch, and follow the natural course.
And I think you make a good point. I think there's a political economy that's going to develop around the refinery. We're already seeing quite a lot of residential and commercial businesses gravitating to that axis. But we haven't spoken much about the Dangote business itself. And Uwa, I wanted to get your thoughts as we look to wrap up. How do you think it's a conglomerate. You know, this project is not a philanthropic project. It's not it has an impact on national development, but ultimately the company's bottom line is going to be in the eye of the conversation. How do you think this impacts profitability for the company in terms of its own growth ambitions and plans?
I think it's huge. I mean, if you look at revenue estimates that are out, the projection at full capacity is somewhere around $21 billion. At, you know, I&E exchange rate, that's close to 9 trillion naira. I mean, if you look at Dangote Cement, which is currently the rainmaker for the Dangote Group, we are projecting revenues to, you know, hit 2 trillion naira next year in 2024. So easily the Dangote Refinery complex can do, you know, almost 4 or 5 times that. But looking below the revenue line, the cement industry typically has higher EBITDA margins. Somewhere around, over the last 5 years, Danksem, Nigeria, has averaged around 60%. For refinery is much lower. So, if you put it side by side, I can easily see EBITDA doubling for the group just based on these 2 projects. Ignoring sugar and all these entities.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting. So, just one more thing, there is a huge opportunity here for the incoming administration because it's coming at a time where there's a large marquee nameplate project coming on board. How do you think this project positions Nigeria in terms of macroeconomic planning? Because it really gives the new government leverage, I think, from an economic perspective, to tell a good story very early on. So based on this project now coming on stream, what do you think the main priority around positioning this project as a watershed moment for the administration?
Yes, a very interesting question. The truth is that Nigeria, at this point, is facing a major debt crisis in terms of we have bunched up maturities. We are in default in 1 or 2 payments. The external imbalances are mammoth. Therefore, if you have a project that is internationally competitive, you can use this as an opportunity. Okay, now we want to come back. We want to restructure our debt. We want to reschedule some of our obligations. We need to go back into the markets to do a number of things. Here we are. There's a project by a Nigerian group of this magnitude, right, situated in a export zone, trade zone, and all of that. It sends a signal that Nigeria wants to be compliant with best practice, right? And therefore, as you appoint your advisors to go and negotiate terms for your scheduling of your debt and meeting with the Troika of the IMF, the World Bank, and the London Club, this becomes a very pivotal moment for Nigeria, I think, for the incoming administration to send a signal that, yes, we are doing this. And we have a program for phasing out subsidies. And we have a program for meeting our debt obligations.
Thank you.
All at this time put together, I think that would be an excellent opportunity.
And a great note to end on. It's been such a pleasure to have you all, Mr. Bismarck Rewane, Ms. Ronke Onadeko, and Uwa Osadiaye. We've been talking about the Dangote Refinery. Well, let's hope all goes well with the inauguration on Monday. That's all for Business Week. You can catch up with all your top business stories here on Arise News over the course of the week. Thanks for watching. I'll be here again next weekend with more analysis on top global business stories. In the meantime, do send me a tweet online to continue the conversation. I'm Rolake Akikugbe Filani. Bye for now.